research has shown that there's one thing that can break the shame cycle, and that's empathy. So empathy combined with collective storytelling, they found when they did that study with the veterans, is a way of finding healing for moral injury. And so just like when I asked you about self-care, what's your one non-negotiable? Empathy is a non-negotiable for healing from moral injury. Now, I know we're great at offering empathy to our patients. You all know what empathy is. But sometimes we're not great at offering empathy to ourselves, which we talked about, self-care and self-compassion, but also to each other. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about empathy, just to help us unpack what empathy is. So I've got two little girls. Their names are Arabella and Lucy. They're 9 and 5. And Lucy's my 5-year-old. She's got this big, kind heart, and she always wants to make sure that everyone feels loved. My 9-year-old also has a big, kind heart as well. But today I'm talking about Lucy. So Lucy has a big, kind heart. So we had this black, fluffy cat, the neighbourhood cat, that was coming to visit us at our house. And he was a bit of a scaredy cat, and my girls were equally as scared of him. And so whenever they'd try and get close to him, he'd just run off. So he wasn't mean or hissing or anything like that, but he was just really scared. So one day I saw Mr. Fuddles was on the front porch, and we called him Mr. Fuddles. We didn't know his real name, but we called him that after a children's book that we'd been reading together called Mr. Fuddles, about this neighbourhood cat that went out on adventures in the neighbourhood. And so we saw Mr. Fuddles on the front porch. And then I saw Lucy rummaging through her dress-up box. I'm like, "What are you doing, darling?" She's like, "I'm looking for my cat costume, so Mr. Fuddles will think that I'm a cat." Off she goes with her black cat mask and her fluffy black tail, and she seriously thought that Mr. Fuddles thought that she was a cat, right? I don't know if you can see Mr. Fuddles' face there. He's looking at me like, "What is going on," right? So there's Lucy on our front porch, and she starts crawling on her all fours, step by step, towards Mr. Fuddles. Yeah, and he's like, "Okay," and he's just sitting there, "Okay, I'm just going to see what's going on," right? Until eventually she was able to get close enough so that she could get close to Mr. Fuddles. This is Lucy just 2 weeks later with Mr. Fuddles. Of course, then after that, he took over our house. He'd spend days curled up in a ball when the big storms were on underneath our bed. But my point here is that this is a really great illustration of empathy. Because sometimes empathy means thinking about the other person, becoming like the other person, even looking like the other person. You know, in Lucy's case, she thought if she could only look like Mr. Fuddles, maybe she could get close enough. And on the other side, 70% of us are either burnt out or feeling like we're suffering from moral injury. So understanding that the person that we're approaching is also scared. They're also fragile and vulnerable. They might also be a bit prickly. They might hiss or scratch, right? But by using empathy and listening in a non-judgmental way, we can actually get closer and closer and closer to the people that we're trying to care for.